if it happens.
This is the story of Robert Baguki and his miraculous survival in the Great Sandy Desert. Western Australia's Great Sandy Desert covers an area of nearly 300,000 square kilometers. For thousands of years, it was the ancestral home of Aboriginal nomads, until the 1960s, when a severe drought forced them to leave their country in search of water. Today, it's sparsely inhabited and rarely visited by tourists.
It's not a place for the faint-hearted. It's very, very remote. You're not likely to see anyone else through that area.
But an unlikely discovery in the winter of 1999 triggers the greatest influx of people to the desert in 40 years.
The bicycle in the property was located by a small group of locals who were four-wheel driving in that area. They'd seen the property, radioed in, then continued on their way. The bike was actually hidden around the back behind a tree, giving an indication that it didn't want to be found. Quick search of the area located some footprints leading off down the track. Why would you want to go down that track? It leads nowhere. My idea was that he was going to walk out the same way he went in, because he would wake up to himself pretty quickly.
Local newspaper journalist Ben Martin picks up on the story and decides to investigate it further.
Well, at first, we were told by the police that it was likely to be an Asian tourist who'd been cycling around Australia. In amongst the gear that was attached to the bike, there were chopsticks, and I think there were instant noodles. And the police somehow took a leap of logic that that would mean it was an Asian tourist.
This is very good.
Once we got it back at the police station, we opened it all up and started going through it all, trying to find who it belonged to. We did find a receipt, and it had Robert Joseph Baguki, the name there, and so it gave us a starting point.
Really, it was a name and a set of footprints that we were following. We knew it was Robert Baguki, we knew he was from Alaska, and we knew that he wore dimple-soled thongs and was walking through the desert. And that's about all we knew. I suppose there was so much interest in the story because it was a crazy thing to do.
The desert thing really started back when I was about 16 years old. This was going to solve everything. This was what I needed to do before I died, you know. It was that was as big as it was.
I would say that Robert needed to lose his dread of being close to people. It was all a weight that held him down, and he wanted to be free to just not have to answer to anyone, I think. Robert really needed to go on this journey so he could become the person he needs to be.
Robert was going to Australia with his girlfriend at the time, Janet, to ride bicycles, basically, around, as I understood it, around the entire continent. And it was the kind of trip that Robert had taken before.
We were going to arrive in Sydney, and we were going to just ride as far as we could. And he was quite good at riding 125 miles a day, and I didn't want to ride that much, so in Melbourne, we made the decision for him to go on and that I would go home.
Robert had seen a map of the deserts of Australia, and the vast uncharted terrain of the Great Sandy Desert had caught his eye.
I looked at that and said, that's on the west coast, up like that. I think I could ride to that. And I kind of made the decision there and then that that was the place I wanted to go. It was pretty quick. Of course, I'd been thinking about going into the desert for a long time, and I knew that at that point I was going to be able to do this thing that I'd been thinking about for so long.
Okay, I promise I will.
The last phone call that I had with Janet, she was supportive. So it was very good to hear that from her, because I thought if she was going to try to discourage me from it, it would have been very difficult to go on with my plan.
Okay, bye. Bye.
I don't feel it's my place to tell him what he can and can't do. It would be holding him back, and that's not my job. My job is to support him and help him get where he needs to go. I looked at it as loyalty.
Robert begins his journey from Sandfire Roadhouse at the edge of the Great Sandy Desert. From here, he plans to go east, down the Pegasus Track to a known waterhole at Dragon Tree Soak, then across open desert to Fitzroy Crossing, a journey of nearly 700 kilometers.
The feeling hit me that I'm leaving the pavement, I'm leaving civilization. That was my final, no, I'm gonna do this.
Robert likes to test his own self-sufficiency. I think he likes to be in the most exotic or remote places by himself, ultimately, to see how I think he survives.
Robert is carrying enough food and water to last him several weeks, but he soon realizes he's not prepared for the unforgiving desert.
It would have been a very easy ride if the road was packed hard, but it was unrideable in a lot of places. Got to the point where I realized that it was unreasonable to be pushing the bike. I would be going faster by walking. All the stuff that I had been carrying around to Australia was no good to me anymore. I just needed to decide on a few things that I could carry.
Leaving behind his food and water, Robert's confident he can survive the grueling journey ahead.
Going without food was the most practical way to get across that desert. And I knew I was going to fast at some point along the way. So I said, I'm ready to fast, and just carried enough food for the next day.